Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, welcome to my channel. So I'm a vintage and vanished video about Elizabeth Campbell. I told you guys that the video was requested by a subscriber whose mother actually knew Elizabeth Campbell, and because of that, the case really affected her and her mother both. Since I got so many requests for different cases that affect you guys, that are cases that are not as talked about, I'm going to be starting a series on my channel called Hits Home. These are going to be about cases that directly affect some of you. Today I'm starting with the case of Muriel Baldridge. This was requested by Lakin Hackworth, who says you should do the Muriel Baldridge case. This case actually happened in the town I live in, and the girl was a cheerleader at my old high school. It's a pretty popular mystery here. I started looking into this case, and it is a very sad case, really is. It happened a long time ago in Kentucky, and it is really not that talked about at all. I have to give full credit to a man named Michael Crisp. He did so much research on this and really brought light to it again, so I hope with this video I can bring even more light to it. So with that being said, let's just get into it. Muriel Baldridge was born October 16th, 1931 to parents Bertha Hayes and George Baldridge. But for now, let's take it to 1949. The first Polaroid camera was sold for $89.95, gas was 17 cents a gallon, and the song Ghost Riders in the Sky by Vaughn Monroe was the #1 hit in June of that year. In 1949, Merle was a 17-year-old cheerleader at Prestonsburg High School in Prestonsburg, Kentucky. She had 3 brothers and 3 sisters, but they all were already moved out of the home. She was a good girl and hung out with a good group of people. Prestonsburg, Kentucky was a quiet little town in eastern Kentucky where everyone knew each other, with a population of about 2,800. Summer started that year. Merle had just finished her junior year of high school and she was going into her senior year, but for now, it was summer, everyone was excited, everyone was enjoying the weather, and at the end of June, the carnival came to town. Merle decided to go to the carnival the night of Monday, June 27th, 1949, with 3 of her girlfriends. Before they went to the carnival though, they had a few other things planned earlier on in the day, which included going to see a movie and going to a softball game. Before leaving the house, she got ready and put on one of her favorite dresses, and her aunt, who was staying at her house at the time, came up to her and gave her a pearl necklace, saying it would look great with her outfit. They had a good time that day, and they spent about an hour and a half at the carnival, and then it started getting really dark outside. It was around 10 p.m., so they all decided to head on home. They all parted ways at the West Prestonsburg Bridge that ran over the Big Sandy River. Her 3 friends insisted on walking her home, but she told them that she'd be fine. She walked this distance a million times. She'd be okay. So at this time, it is late, it is dark. She's walking by herself across this bridge, but she is not afraid because, like I said, this is a good town. This is a town where everyone knew each other. It had a good heart. And besides, she lived just on the other side of the bridge. While she was walking across the bridge, someone attacked her. This person abducted and assaulted her. Around 10:30 p.m., people reported hearing a woman scream. No one decided to check it out though, and they later would find out it was Merle's. From my research, the real reason that people were a tiny bit alarmed by the screaming but didn't really go to check it out is because they lived not far from a hospital, and they would hear screaming all the time from people that were in pain and were being brought into the hospital. Also, there was a neighbor who heard the screaming and she was really startled, and she looked outside. She thought it was possibly like a hurt dog, and she kept looking out and she didn't see anything. She saw kind of a man in the distance, but she couldn't really tell what was going on, and then nothing else happened, so she just closed her blinds and went to bed. The next morning, Tuesday, June 28th, 1949, at around 6 a.m., 300 yards from her house, her body was found. She was on the riverbank underneath the bridge when a truck driver passed by and saw her body and called the police. She was badly beaten with fatal blows to the head. At the crime scene, they found a lead pipe, footprints in a size 8.5 to 9 in the mud, and an empty whiskey bottle. At first, they thought that this lead pipe may have been the instrument used to attack her, but they later found out that the injury was from the butt of a gun. They also found her pearl necklace on a small peach tree that had been uprooted. Now, obviously, it had been uprooted while she was being dragged down to the riverbank, so she definitely put up a fight and tried her hardest to get away from her attacker. You are also probably wondering why her parents didn't think much when she didn't come home the night before. Well, back in that day, in a small town, you know, if your daughter, who was almost an adult, was out late at night and didn't come home, you would most likely just retire to bed because you would figure that she's with a good group of people and she just decided to have a last-minute sleepover. They didn't really think anything bad happened. I mean, that was just their thinking at the time. She had done this a million times before. Many people were questioned by police, basically anyone who knew Merle at any time in her life in the town, but especially around the time that she died. The first suspect was a friend of hers named Donald Horn. He ended up leaving town on a bus the day she was murdered. A day or two after her murder, he told local authorities he was wanted for questioning in Kentucky for her murder. People back in Kentucky thought that he may have been the one who did it, so much so that the governor in Kentucky extradited him back to Kentucky. But when he got there, he brought his bus pass showing that he wasn't in town at the time of her murder, so he was automatically ruled out as a suspect. During their investigation, a 15-year-old carnival worker named Allen came forward claiming he saw a former carnival worker named Bill Gamble commit the murder. 2 weeks later, Bill Gamble signed a confession, but then Allen took back his statement saying he just made it up and had no idea who actually killed her. Bill Gamble claimed he only signed it because police told him to, and that he actually had no idea how to read or write. So this was definitely a downfall in the case, but people still held hope, and police thought that they would be able to find their guy eventually, or guys. Later on, 2 Prestonsburg residents were charged with her murder. One of those residents was Lon Moles, a known member of the Prestonsburg Board of Education, and the other was Lon's friend, a man who was with him the night of Merle's murder, a man who was Merle's neighbor. His name was E.K. Dotson. Being a part of the Board of Education was a big deal in this town at the time. It was like being a member of city council. This man was a very respected man, but he was known for being an older man who kept an eye on younger women. And there was a rumor that he had a crush on Merle, and he was also a heavy drinker. As for E.K., like I said before, he was with Lon the night of her murder, and he was her neighbor. And his backyard was right on the riverbank. Whoever murdered her had to have known the path going down to the riverbank really well because it was dark. There were a lot of twists and turns. You would have to know exactly where to step to drag somebody down there so you wouldn't fall yourself. So whoever killed her had to have known that little bit of path very, very well. They also found footprints going up from the riverbank to his yard between his house and the other neighbor's house. Now, this doesn't automatically mean that he's guilty. Somebody else could have committed the crime and then walked through his yard since it was right there, but it does look a little fishy. It was theorized that these 2 men were in cahoots and that they planned to murder Merle together. A little bit later, a couple who sold bootleg alcohol claimed that the night that Merle was murdered, Lon and E.K. made a few trips to them to purchase alcohol. The type of alcohol, you guess? The same whiskey that was found near the crime scene, 4 Roses. She said that their first trip down there was around 10 p.m. and their second trip down there was around 2 a.m. and that, strangely, between the first and second trip down there, Lon changed clothes. And during their third trip, which was later on in the morning, Lon and E.K. actually asked her if anybody else bought that type of whiskey the night before, which looks very suspicious. There was also a witness that came forward claiming that a few days after the murder, Lon Moles came to him trying to change the seat covers in his vehicle. And when he did the job, this man remembered a very strange looking stain on the headrest of one of the seats. Lon found out about this and he was furious. He went and confronted the man and he said, "No, I got my seat covers changed days before the murder." And this man insisted, "No, Lon, you got them changed after her murder." So again, this looks very fishy. Lon claimed that at the time of her murder, he was home. He said that him and his wife both retired to bed around 9:30 p.m. But his wife's sister and a neighbor said that his car was not in the driveway after 9:30. So the trial date was set for them and everyone was super eager to hear the final outcome. The trial was originally set to take place in Floyd County, Kentucky, and was later changed to Pike County, Kentucky. Lon Moles went up first. He was facing the death penalty for the murder of Muriel Baldridge. It took them 53 minutes to deliberate, and they came back with a verdict, and they found him not guilty. And because he was found not guilty, E.K. Dotson was automatically found not guilty because he was with him the night of her murder. Merle was buried in Reuben Allen Cemetery in Floyd County, Kentucky. A few years later, there was a man named Minor Caldwell Taylor who confessed to the slaying of Merle Baldridge, only to recant his confession a few days later. There were never any more suspects in this case, and Merle's case still remains open to this day, and police are still taking any information anyone may have about this case, even if most people around the town back then of Prestonsburg are now gone. Now, this crime took place in 1949, which of course they were not as skilled in how to handle a crime scene properly back then in that day, but they made a lot of mistakes. They never attempted to collect any fingerprints. They didn't even keep her clothes that she had on at the time that she was murdered for further research, and they didn't even barricade the area off. After the trial, they gave Lon and E.K. back their belongings, and Lon and E.K., as soon as they got home, burned everything, which again looks very suspicious. The Baldridge family was actually given back all of Merle's belongings, including the dress that she had on, and they ended up burning them as well, but for a completely different reason. It was just really hard for them to look at all her belongings that she had with her the night that she was murdered, so they just decided to get rid of them completely. Her family held a little bit of hope, but they felt like this case would absolutely never be solved. I mean, near the beginning, they thought that there was a possibility because it was such a small town, but as time went on, just the time that it happened in history, just the chances of it being solved are so little because they just weren't as advanced in technology as we are in today's time. I mean, if we had that dress even 20 years ago, we may have been able to solve this case. Most people who research into this case agree that whoever murdered Merle had to have known her personally. I mean, the attack was just too sudden and it was too violent. They had to have just planned it out and knew that she was the one that they were going to go after, and they went through with their plan. Some people theorize that if it wasn't E.K. or Lon who committed the crime, that it may have been somebody who made a pass at her earlier on in the day, and that she declined and they drank a little bit and got angry, and they decided to attack her because they knew where she lived. I mean, this is a huge possibility. The motive for her murder was definitely not robbery because the most expensive thing that she had on her was her pearl necklace, and it was left at the crime scene. The motive was most likely rape because her dress was extremely ripped. So whoever killed her, unless it got ripped while she was being dragged down, tried to rip the clothes off of her. I try to keep a lot of hope in cases that are older. I mean, there's cases that are 50+ years old that have been solved, but I just don't feel like this one will be solved unless there is a deathbed confession. I personally think that E.K. and Lon look extremely suspicious. I mean, just with the evidence behind it. But if they did kill her, they were at the store buying liquor around 10 p.m. So they must have bought the liquor and then immediately went to attack her. This case is really terrifying because this was a town where nobody really had a lot of drama or ill will towards each other, and something like this still occurred. This was a beautiful young girl who was very outgoing. She had her entire life ahead of her. I mean, she was a cheerleader, she was going into senior year, she was going to be graduating soon, and just like that, after a night of going out with her friends, her life is cut short. The person who really brought light to this case again after so many years was a man named Michael Crisp. Michael wrote a book about the murder of Muriel Baldridge called Murder in the Mountains, the Muriel Baldridge Story. And he really helped spread the word about this case all over again.
Murder in the Mountains, the Muriel Baldridge story, is a remarkable story that I first learned about while directing the film The Very Worst Thing. The Very Worst Thing was a movie about the 1958 Floyd County school bus disaster, and as soon as I was beginning work on that film, a lot of the people that I was talking to started telling me this amazing story about the murder of a young innocent girl in Prestonsburg.
If you want to learn more about this case, I will have all my resources linked down below, and there's also a podcast that I will link there also that Michael Crisp was featured on where he talked about this case. Definitely let me know what you think about the case and leave any more requests for video ideas, and especially for my new Hits Home series. I will see you guys in my next video. I love you all so much, and make sure to like and subscribe if you're not already. Bye guys.